There's somebody out there who has nobody to turn to, who has nobody to ask. So I think the more of these kinds of things that we can put out, I like to use a relay analogy, like if I've been given a baton, it's my job to run and pass it on to the next person, who pass it on to the next person till we can go for gold.
Hey everybody, thank you very much for dialing into the Legend Within video series. Each week I'll be posting a video with a guest speaker that will be talking about their background, we'll be talking about their experiences, we'll be talking about what goes behind why they do what they do. And today's guest is a very special guest from South Africa. His name is Donovan Goliath. He grew up in the Eastern Cape. He also studied graphic design, and he journeyed on to becoming a comedian, moving to the big metropolitan in Johannesburg where he pursued talent. In his professional career, he's become an entrepreneur, a TV presenter, an actor, and he also co-hosts a daily show called The Sky Room on his Facebook page. In addition to that, he's also the host of the South African Music Awards. He also learned how to speak multiple different languages, and he's also broke barriers with an unbelievable work ethic to pursue his passion and his dreams. I've asked Donovan to come on today to talk about his experiences, to talk about his background, and to talk about what goes behind why he does what he does. So for those of you that are looking to adopt a growth mindset, maximize potential, and become the best version of yourself, this is a great video for you. Donovan, thank you so much, my man, for being here.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for making me feel bad with that incredibly neat and tidy background behind you. That's at first I thought, no man, this thing can't be so neat and so well put together. I thought it was one of those Zoom backgrounds.
Everybody thinks it's a virtual background. That gets confused quite a bit. People don't really have that high expectation of me, so they normally think that that's a Zoom background. But it's actually in my basement, and it's all the way in the US. It's 10:11 right now in the morning, and there's a tornado outside, by the way. So that's why it gets so dark.
We're speaking through a tornado.
We're speaking through a tornado. Some special circumstances, but I wanted to make sure that I got you on for that.
So if things start flying around there, we can't end this. We just have to keep going until you fly away.
Exactly. Then you have to do your transporter accent and impersonation and then get us out. Put us in the trunk of your car and get us out of here. All right?
Got you. Thank you so much for having me though, brother.
Thank you so much for joining, man. I appreciate you being here. Jumping straight into it. Tell us about you. Tell us about who is Donovan Goliath.
So Donovan David Goliath. Actually, a lot of people don't know that David is actually my second name. True story, not even kidding. I'm from Umtata in the Eastern Cape. I grew up there. I have always been, somebody who's into art. I went and studied art and design, worked in advertising for a bit, eventually transitioned into stand-up comedy, and then started a comedy company with my business partners who are also Goliaths. We're not related though, Goliath and Goliath. And now I'm chatting to one of the most important people I've probably ever chatted to.
You do have a lot of stories. Like researching you for this interview, like I looked at so many of your stories, not just from your personal upbringing, but also from your professional career as well, in terms of all the things you've been able to do. And so, I was trying so hard to figure out, like, how do we grab those key moments in this 30 minutes that we have, just to make sure that our viewers walk away with the most impactful moments of your career and your background. You have this unbelievable drive in a very competitive field, like please, an extremely competitive field. But you have this drive and this pursuit to continuously tell your stories and also, pursue your own happiness. Like, where does that drive come from? And why do you get into comedy?
I've never wanted to do comedy. The first stand-up comedy show I watched was in 2010. So when I was growing up, man, I was always an artistic kid. Like I could draw, from a very early age. If you research my Instagram thoroughly enough, you'll see a lot of religious oil paintings I did for a Catholic priest of mine who would hire me to go to Marion Hill, which is a retreat house in KZN, Durban, to paint, for this church and, for a lot of other rural, like just communities around the area, which I did, and he would pay me. And that's what kind of got me through university. I just didn't get any money from my dad because I told him, let me do this. And this is how I'll sustain myself, for however long it takes. So I've always just been intrigued by the visual arts. But growing up where I grew up, I had obviously nobody to harness that, I mean, there was nobody to kind of guide me and show me the ropes, et cetera, et cetera. So I did meet in my final year of school in matric, a teacher who had studied graphic design. And he was just he was a substitute, and he was teaching art. And, I told him this is what I wanted to study. And he told me to go onto the Port Elizabeth website where I found graphic design. I had no clue what it was. And I told my parents I wanted to study this. I applied, fortunately, they believed in me. Like anything I kind of put my mind to, like I push it as hard as I can. I used to rap in Mtata as well. So anything that, required me to express myself, I was curious about it. Doesn't matter what the medium was. I really wanted to take it on. But stand-up comedy still wasn't on the radar at the time because I hadn't seen enough of it and I hadn't been exposed to it. So I studied graphic design, and I think what I liked about it, I only learned this later when I got a job in advertising, was I actually just like communication. So whether it's me communicating or I'm using a medium to communicate it, so painting, drawing, design, making adverts, that's what I enjoy. I just enjoy seeing the reaction of people, reacting to whatever my thoughts and ideas were being projected in a specific way. And I watched a stand-up show in 2011 for the first time, or 2010, whichever one it was. And I was just so intrigued at the way this guy was telling stories about his life, like detailed stories about his life, simple things that like so relatable, and I sat and I watched this. I was in awe. I wasn't even laughing. And I just thought about my stories, where I grew up. I mean, I could translate a lot of this stuff, put it on stage, and I got an opportunity to do 5 minutes. So I had to condense a big part of my life in 5 minutes. And I wrote the set and people loved it. And, I got called back to do another gig and they loved that. And slowly the bug started biting, and I guess the rest is history, and now, jumping forward, I resigned from my job in advertising to go into stand-up comedy because I actually wanted to own my ideas. I realized when I was working, I was coming up with these ideas and giving them to other performers to act out. And then I would just go back and sit and come up with more ideas. So I just felt like I was on a conveyor belt, but I wasn't getting any of the recognition for it, so to speak. So that's why I left to do stand-up, because I wanted to own my ideas, number one, but I also wanted to be my own boss, my own creative director. I wanted that feeling of writing something, throwing it out, not sure if it's going to work or not. And when it does work, there's this roar, of laughter that comes back at you that you can't describe at all. And that was the drug for me. That's what kept me coming back to it. And now with social media and with the internet, I try my best to do the same thing online. And, my girlfriend and I have been making a lot of content during the lockdown, entertaining as many people as possible. And somebody said it so well. They said, it seems like the captivity gave you a little bit, or gave you your freedom, because I did go through a bit of a slump where, I'd lost my drive quite a bit because I was too focused on doing one thing. So it's given me time to think and given me time to really express myself once again. It doesn't matter what the medium is. If I'm doing an impression, if I'm just showing you my photography page or whatever it is, I'm going to try and find a way to express myself, which is who I am and what I do. That was a very long answer.
No, that was a great answer because I picked up a couple of things from that, and there was a lot in there. I always say, like, the most impactful communicators are the ones that provide the most value. And so your passion comes from like your ability and your enjoyment and your excitement for communicating, but also the equity of value, and that equity, all the stories that you could tell about your background, combining that too, and that made this lethal combination that made you this prolific figure that you are in the industry. You've also ventured into like your own entrepreneurial activities. And so entrepreneurial activities in a very risky field like the one you're in, there's massive risk to that. There's massive like transitions that can happen, failures that you have to deal with. Like, talk to me about how do you become an entrepreneur and like how do you manage that risk that you've taken?
Look, I guess the biggest entrepreneurial move that we have made, I say we because my business partners, Jason, Nicholas, and Kate Goliath, but we met on stage in 2011 and realized that we have the same surname and I guess the same passions and the same drive, and just just formulated a company. We called it Goliath and Goliath, play on David and Goliath, obviously. And we, at the time, there weren't many, I guess, stand-up comedy companies. And we started a company because we actually just wanted to create our own gigs. Because at the time, there weren't any. You'd have to wait for about 2 months to jump on and test your material just to do 5 minutes, you know? So we were just like, okay, well, we'll just create the opportunities then for ourselves. We started one gig, which we called a Wednesday. It happened on the last Wednesday of every month, which then just ended up developing a cult following. You know, it would sell out. We ended up making merch. So we made these t-shirts. I designed the logo. I was responsible for the branding, still am, you know, the look and feel of the brand. But we wanted to go left field with it and break the perception of what comedy looks like. So
Right.
visually, comedy it's such a cheesy thing. Like a lot of people have used word art for too long to make stand-up comedy posters. It's always the velvet background with the microphone and the spotlight and the chair. Yeah, we've all seen this. So we just wanted to make something cool, you know. I mean, we had this weird surname that we doubled up. We called it Goliath and Goliath. We made merch, which stand-up comics weren't doing at the time. We created our own gig. You know, we were from very different backgrounds. Like there were these stories, so many layers, but we knew that this would catch attention eventually and it would be a great story to tell. So story has always been our thing, you know. How much or how many layers can we add to what we do so that we always have something to say? But starting Goliath and Goliath and starting our first gig, we ended up at some point running 8 gigs in Johannesburg and the Val, the gig that you had gone to in the Val, where I met you first. That was our gig. We were running that. So we had 8 gigs in Johannesburg that we were running, and all of that culminated into, I guess, the mothership. We built a comedy club in Melrose Arch, one of the most expensive, I guess, areas in the Southern Hemisphere, with a business partner. Massive. We called it the Goliath Comedy Club. There was a restaurant and a coffee shop attached to it. Man, what an experience. And what a scary thing to do. You know, I was nervous about it. Jason, he's our business head. You know, he kind of convinced us that this would be okay. And I was still not entirely convinced. But when we had looked back at all the things that we had done and how long it took us to get to actually owning our own space, like we had done the time, you know, we really had done the time. There weren't going to be any surprises here, apart from rent being 10 times what we would ever know. So we had learned a lot from that, you know, and I think that we cut our teeth, you know, at that gig quite a bit, which we then sold, which was a very mature business decision. Somebody had offered us quite a bit of money for the place, and the money that they had offered us was pretty much what our debt was on it. So we were like, yo, we can walk away clean here or keep going with this thing. Unfortunately, we did sell it, because if we still owned the place during lockdown, I probably wouldn't have accepted this invitation, you know, to do this, because I'd be depressed as all hell. Yeah, man, we sold it and actually just went back. We got a smaller place, but went back to what got us here in the beginning, which is performing, you know, and trying out different avenues. And we've always been, I guess, trendsetters, in that instead of doing stand-up comedy online, we started a talk show, which today it would be our 93rd episode since the lockdown started. Every single day we were pushing this thing hard. We got celebrities on every day. And we didn't plan anything. So nothing's planned, nothing's scripted. Once the person comes on stage, we just run with it, which is the beauty of it, you know, because you never know what you're going to get. The audience who logs on never knows what's going to happen. We were fortunate enough to even get Miss Universe on the show, who tuned in from the States, from New York, you know, which was amazing. But yeah, man,
So, bro, when it comes to performing, right?
off. Sorry,
one thing you touched on there was, when it comes to performing, right? Obviously, there's a lot of people that really struggle with communication. You know, obviously you have a passion for communication, and I can't tell you how many folks I talk to in several different fields, not just in the field that you're in, not just in entertainment, but in several different fields. When I communicate with them one-on-one, the amount of equity and value that they provide is unbelievable. But the moment they get in front of a setting of more than 2 people, or a public setting, everything seems to go away, right? And that clear articulation is not really displayed the way it should be. or the way you expect it to be. And so how do you compose yourself? What do you have, like a mantra that you're using to compose yourself and just communicate effectively and clearly?
No, I don't think I have a mantra. I think I'm just fortunate that I think being in advertising really taught me how to be able to communicate effectively, because I would be put in boardrooms where I'm convincing a CEO of a company to hand over 5 million rand
Right.
so we can make this ad, and I'm this young kid from this ad agency. So you find your words, man, and you really find the right words in the tightest way possible to sell this idea to this person and convince them and make them go, yeah, I see the ROI in what you're trying to get out of me, which made my transition into comedy a lot easier, I think. But
Because
I've
it
been
gives you that
approached.
confidence, right?
Yes, it's definitely that confidence. And, I've been approached by a lot of business people. So if I would do a set somewhere or host a gig or whatever it is, somebody would come up to me and say, exact question that you asked me, where do you develop this confidence to be able to speak, and like at the drop of a hat, just start going. And I always say that, I mean, we all know that public speaking is probably the biggest fear for anybody. Who is it that said that people fear public speaking more than death? Which
Right,
is
right,
that's a very intense fact. But the one thing I always say is that because everybody's afraid to do this, anybody who gets on a stage to talk, you've already won, because nobody in the audience wants to be in that position. So if you have a microphone, for me, I always say, and I say to these guys, that's like a wand, man. That's like a scepter. You already are in control. The best thing that you can do is just do you. The worst thing you can do, if you're not a funny person and you're a little bit introverted and you go up there and you try and tell jokes because this is what you've seen before, you're going to tank completely. It just gets awkward for all of us. So the best thing that you can do is and stop watching too many presentations, stop watching too many people talk and trying to emulate them, because you won't be able to do that.
right.
And at some point, if somebody derails you, if somebody heckles or asks you a question mid-sentence, it's going to be very hard for you to jump back onto that same rhythm unless this is what you do. So the tighter you make your whatever you're trying to say, the tighter you make it, the more you speak from the heart, the more you speak without trying to use quotes and all of these fluffy things that somehow somebody put out there and said, like, this is the way. If you want to present professionally, this is what it needs to be. Gone are those days. And there's that. But I also tell people to check out there's a Japanese format called pechakucha, or pachakcha, as the Japanese call it. And what that is, it's a style of presentation where every single speaker only gets 20 slides to present. But each slide is timed, but you don't control the timer. So each slide is 20 slides, but each slide is timed to 20 seconds. So you have 20 seconds to try and get your message across from what's on that slide. And the Japanese say that if you do that, the speaker actually understands exactly what they're speaking about. Because what ends up happening is you take words off of that screen and you just put a picture up, and that's all you speak to. You condense the information down to such a simple point that that's all you need to say to get the message across to whoever you're speaking to. But I think it's almost 7 minutes, 6.5 minutes, or whatever it is. That time frame is enough to grip people's attention, to hold, so that when they walk away, they know exactly what they spoke about or what they just saw, but also enough for you to deliver a full-bodied message. And I go, the tighter and the shorter you can make your presentations and make your speeches, the better it's going to be for you, because then you don't faff and try and find all of these little fluffy tricks, like trying to use jokes and trying to use this and trying to use that to make your presentation or whatever you're trying to say a lot fuller. So yeah, that's it, bro, in a nutshell.
That's
For
good.
me,
I'm
it
actually going
sounds
to
very
steal that.
complicated.
I'm going to take that from you, because one of the things that I typically do is that a different approach, but there's some similarities to it. I normally try to think of, like, within the 5 minutes, what are the three things that I need to capitalize on? And I kind of
Yes.
call it the power of three, right? I mean, obviously it's not original in any way, but I try to call it the power of three in everything I communicate. Like, what are the top three things I want to say in this 5 minutes, this slide, in the next slide, in the next slide, in this
Yes.
interview, for example. And so,
Yes.
I think one of the things I want to talk to you about in everything you said there was, being able to deliver on yourself, being able to think about yourself, not emulate other people and not copy anybody else, and just do you, right? And that
Yeah,
authenticity is what like rides above and brings out the success that you're trying to achieve. But there's
yes,
a lot of time, the output sometimes is failure, dealing with failure.
yes,
Like, for example, we'll watch this interview back, and then there's some things we'll say, yeah, we could have done that better. We could have done that better. Donovan could have been
yes.
a bit more funnier, etc. I'm kidding, right? But we
That's
would do
hilarious.
that, right? And the reason for that is because sometimes, we're our own biggest critiques in many ways.
Yes, of
And,
course.
and one of the harshest things of being a public performer, not just a comedian, is bombing, choking.
Oof, yeah.
How do you
Look,
deal
that's
with that type
happened.
of failure?
It's happened many times. I just want to say, and any comic that tells you they haven't died on stage, they haven't performed enough, and they haven't put themselves out there enough. Yeah, I've died many times. Where you just want to give up. Where you tell yourself that maybe the first 3 months it was just luck. You were riding a wave, and now it's over. Like, you're done. Nobody's going to buy into this. Because the hardest thing about doing comedy is every single time you go on stage at whatever event, it's like hitting the reset button. It's never the same. The audience is different, the energy is different. The When I say, or you can break audience down into categories as well. The LSM could be different. You could be talking to CEOs or blue collar workers. The language barriers are going to be a hindrance at some point. You're coming after a speech where the CEO has just said, we're retrenching 20 people. All right, let's bring the comic on. Go on, do your thing, So
Right.
you're dealing with so much, and that happens. And it's happened so many times to me. But dude, you know what? It took me a while, but this is from chatting to peers, guys who've been doing this longer than I have. They'll tell you that that is definitely part of the growth. There's two things that you can do. You can either give up, or you can step back and figure out why it didn't work. So really break it down, and you have to be so honest with yourself, and go, yeah, obviously this one wasn't going to work. This joke and the audience that I was performing to, like, I should have had a little bit more insight, and I should have really dug deep and gone, this is because a lot of times we just take a chance, we throw it out
Nice.
hoping that it's going to go.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, you wing it when, like, your ego gets in the way and you think,
Yeah.
oh, you're funny, man, you can get this through, and that hardly ever goes that way. Obviously it hurts, there's no way it's not going to hurt you, and it's going to sit with you for a bit. You're going to um, tell yourself that yeah, you're probably not as good as you think you are, and but you got to like step back and try and figure out why it didn't work, and then go out and try it again. That's what you have to do,
Right.
and there are many gigs out there that are death traps, bro. Like, there are a couple, I'm not going to mention their names right now, but you just know for sure when you jump on that stage, there's a 90% chance that you're going to die here. I mean, we used to do a show when we were just starting out. We had been invited to do this show where there were burlesque dancers that came before us. So the comedy would start after the burlesque dancers and drunk audience, and you'd have to go after that. Yo, bro, let me tell you. But those are the places where you get stronger. That's where you really get strong, is really trying to figure out what it is. What is the rhythm of these people? How do I need to find, or where do I go to find that real gap? I mean, Chris Rock did it. I think he toured, but went to some of the hardest places in the States where, like in the South, like he toured the South quite a bit, and Chris Rock and the things that
Right.
he speaks about. But he was just like, that's where I'm going to get stronger, and he did come back stronger, much stronger. Because you can fall into a comfort zone. It's very easy to fall into a comfort zone and only perform at places where you're always guaranteed success. But that's not the way you do it. That's not the way you get big, and
That's
that's
not how
not
you
the way you
grow.
try.
Yeah.
No, and when you start doing this, the thing that is exciting, which I touched on briefly, was you get these what do you call it, like these butterflies in your stomach, because you never know what's going to happen. It's like fishing. You just
Right.
throw it out there, and you never know what you're going to get back. And the beauty about comedy is the idea that people pay for your crazy thoughts, but you never know if they're going to walk away, yes, that was a good purchase, or never doing that again, because people will turn on you hard. And nowadays with social media, your name can spread very quickly. So it's just always harder and harder to to build a solid reputation. But you really do just have to try, man, and just keep going back.
The thing I take away from that, Donovan, is that you focus on the things that you can control, which is making sure you're
Yes.
also prepared, making sure you're willing to go outside your comfort zone, take those risks, and being able to deliver yourself, being authentic and deliver, and then let the rest take its course. And so
Yes.
that's what I take away from that. There's a lot of up and comers today, maybe not only up and comers, a lot of people that are experienced this as well, that have that fear of taking those risks, have that
Yes.
fear of going outside their comfort zone and doing things that they want to do. Like a lot of people are sitting back home now, even in comedy as well. They have all these ideas, they have all these messages, they have this content. They're like, yeah, but I don't want to share it. What if this, what if that,
Yeah.
what if people say, etc., etc. What is your advice for those people?
I was that guy, especially like with holding on to content and not putting it out online, which until the lockdown happened, and going back to that phrase of captivity gave me freedom, did I realize that this is a 24-hour stage. There are no rules. You in control here of this stage. When I say stage, I mean these platforms, like Instagram, for example. You really can express yourself and build a global audience. There are a lot of young comics, not a lot, there are a few young comics who have found major success now during this time, not doing stand-up, but finding other avenues where they're still funny, but not in the traditional sense that I think we all know comedy to be. And one of the reasons South African entertainers, I guess comedians, are quite weird like this, don't really want to share that stuff online, especially their stand-up material, because they feel that people would see that and I can't do those jokes again. But then you go, man, there are like over 50 million people in this country.
Mm-hmm.
If the video that you've put out has reached 5,000 people, you're really lucky. If 5,000 people have seen that, you're really lucky. There are a lot of people still to perform to. So trust me, if you're serious about this thing and really, go out and try. I mean, this is a big country, and performing in Cape Town is very different to performing in the Eastern Cape, is very different to performing in Johannesburg, is very different to performing in Durban. The audiences are so different. And unless you've gone to all of those places and experienced as many gigs as possible and performed in front of many audiences, I don't see why you shouldn't be putting your stuff out there and, just being as vulnerable as possible and letting it go. I think the hard thing, though, about releasing your content online is that you kind of don't have control of the feedback, because you've got keyboard warriors saying whatever they want.
Right.
On stage, you're still in a little bit of control. You can sway things. You can feel when the energy isn't moving based on what you're saying and swing it to what is going to work. Once it's out there, it's out there. It's like left open for people to just shred apart, which they do. So it's very hard. It can be quite degrading also, because that stuff can spread. If it's a bad set, if it's a good or a bad set, people are still going to spread it, because there's a humiliation culture that happens online. So it's very tough, and I can understand why a lot of young people don't do it. I've seen a lot of young guys start this thing. They die on their first set and they'll never come back to it again, because it just ruins you completely.
You just have to make that first move and not give up, right? And continuously take with the failure.
Yeah, man.
But dude,
those are the guys that win. Sorry, man. The guys that win are the ones who just continuously keep trying, and there aren't that many of them if you think about it. But they're just the ones who take the punches and just keep going, man.
You talked about performing, and you mentioned a lot of different regions in South Africa there. When are we going to see you in the US? Like, I mean, there's other comedians that have made it and, that are doing it internationally. You've got two stand-up shows, like single-man shows.
Yeah.
You've got
Yeah,
two.
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I think I've told you this already, right? The only opportunity I had to watch your one-man show was on an airplane, and it was a South African Airways flight. When are we going to see you on an international stage in the US? How can people get access to contact?
I should, I should do that. And I think the most important thing you said there is, how can people get access to your content? I mean, my first show, look, it is very South African. So, one would have to maybe put subtitles in there to explain a lot of the stuff that I'm speaking about. So, I mean, it was kind of written predominantly for South Africans. There was no real intention for it to work overseas.
Right.
But, I definitely should start expanding and not contradict myself, by saying, no, because I've just said now that, we have a global stage with the internet. You really can just put something out there if you wanted to. I really should start expanding and testing myself and, just taking that leap, I guess, and, creating universal material. It could be South African related material. And there's clever ways to do that, where you're kind of teaching people about your country, but in funny ways, which I think that people in the US would appreciate. Also very good to start breaking a lot of stigmas about South Africa,
Exactly.
Through comedy. I think
Exactly.
that would be a great tool, a great device to do that. Trevor, I think, has done that exceptionally well. And I think we need more of that.
Exactly. How can people find you?
On all social media platforms, it's Donovan Goliath, Donovan. A lot of people seem to spell it Donavan, which is weird. Donovan Goliath on all social media platforms. I think predominantly Instagram is the place that I enjoy the most. So come there first. Look, I can't thank you enough, man, for this conversation that we just had. I mean, we could have spoken now for 2 hours. I think these kinds of things are so important. There's somebody out there who has nobody to turn to, who has nobody to ask. So I think the more of these kinds of things that we can put out, I like to use a relay analogy, like if I've been given a baton, it's my job to run and pass it on to the next person, who pass it on to the next person till we can go for gold. Because I was in the ad world, I host the Lurie Awards, which is advertising awards. We ended up doing a 5-part webinar series where we chose different people in the ad world to have an hour-long conversation with and just really unpack. But it was a Q&A session where it wasn't just an interview. We allowed whoever logged on to pose the questions. Anything you've ever wanted to ask about being a TV producer in advertising, now's the chance. It was so great. The value that came out of it was so amazing. And I think the more of these we can do, the better. I wish that I had a big brother, a mentor growing up who I could ask questions. I think I would have achieved things a lot sooner that way. So that's what I try and do. And that's why I think platforms like these are so important, where you've gained a certain amount of knowledge and experience. So I think it's really good that you're trying to harness it by finding the right people, because you understand who you need to get and allow them to share. Because there are a lot of people out there who find such value, sometimes even in one little thing that you say. There's a light bulb moment that goes off. So I really hope that you're going to keep doing a lot more of these and keep finding interesting people, because man, it's so powerful. It might seem like a little thing, but I always say you can never have enough podcasts or webinar series, because there's just so many interesting people to learn from out there. So power to you, brother.
Appreciate you acknowledging that, Donovan. That means a lot. That's the intent with this, right? Which is the reason I brought you on. I know your background, right? So I know all the stuff you've done. And I know it's going to be an inspirational, and it's going to move people that are watching it as well. So thank you for doing everything you've done.
Appreciate you, bro.
So for those of you who are watching, I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I did. Make sure you follow Donovan. Make sure you find him on YouTube or Instagram. He's got some amazingly funny videos and some really incredible impressions of some very well-known people that we know. And also, he's taking his graphic designing skills to Instagram as well, where some say he might be doing real FaceTime calls with some of our future presidents, actually. And some say he might just be editing his pictures. But I'll let you be the judge of that.
Awesome, bro. Appreciate it so much, man. This was so cool.